Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. I have obtained a copy of The Dark Summer, which I will be unboxing today. And there's a couple reasons why I picked this up. One, so Ted will stop hassling me every time I make an omission about when I talk about the game, which turns out to be quite a lot for a game that I didn't own and hadn't played. But also because I am into a D-Day as a topic, and it does look like a good game. I do like Ted as a designer, and this is, of course, the so-called Dark system that we've seen in earlier games like the Dark Valley. So this is a hex and counter chit pull design, and in the case of the Dark Valley, which I have played, actually like the implementation very much. So let's open this up and see what we got. The first thing we notice right away is we're in this sort of 1.5 inch box, which is pretty unusual for GMT nowadays. I would assume that this is not a mounted map, but nevertheless, this 1.5 inch box from GMT is pretty unusual, but it's a pretty nice looking box at that. Okay, so it is the newer, quite thick GMT box stock, so virtually bulletproof. Okay, so we have, let's take it apart in an orderly manner. We do have a divider in here, which is holding a die. I would just assume them. So the real reason why these are in here is because, presumably because these things are manufactured overseas, that they have a long transit time ahead of them. These inserts are designed to keep the materials from floating around inside of the box and becoming damaged. In the case of games with decks of cards and stuff like that, I think there's no real way around this. In this case, I feel like I'd have rather not had the die and had a counter tray instead, which would have been about the same height as this insert, which will now be placed into the recycling container. So, aside from that, though, we've got 2 books, some player aids, 2 counter sheets, and a map. So let's take a look at the books first. Now, there's rather a long history of games that exist kind of in this space as sort of one-map games that commence with the invasion of Normandy in June of 1944, and they can vary widely in total scope. You have, for example, a game like the old Avalon Hill D-Day, or the old SPI Normandy, for example, which went well beyond the Normandy campaign proper, to games like the Mighty Endeavor from MMP that starts with D-Day, but you play it pretty much to the end of the war. This you just play the Normandy campaign out. We'll take a look at the map in a minute here. The rulebook is a 24-page rulebook, so I believe this to be, it's on a pretty glossy stock, pretty nice, very standard GMT layout. Design we can see from Ted Racer, developer Ivan Blair, counters and map Charles Kibler and Chad Jensen, and it looks like the Vassal module was done by Joel Toppin. Okay, so full color, pretty nice looking rulebook. I don't believe this to be a particularly complex game, and I believe it to be relatively quick playing, quicker, for example, than Normandy 44, which is a game I have played and which I like a lot. Nevertheless, looking at, looks like there's some a little more detail in the air system, it actually looks like, which is fairly interesting. And we've got some battalion scale units, but also some regiment level units and presumably brigades. So I'm not sure where this game is going to fall, but I believe it is a regimental level game. That does appear to be correct. So of the 24 pages here, they're pretty much all rules. But hey, it's 24 pages. I'd call that a medium complexity game, and I think that's a reasonable statement for most people, and not just people that like heavy games. So here's the playbook. This is a 20-page playbook with an index in the back, which is rather nice. Here is an extended example of play, a mandatory inclusion. Of course, the famous Jaws of whatever, Jaws of, I think the photograph is called Jaws of Victory, I think. I could be wrong, but that doesn't sound right now that I say it out loud. There's a name for this iconic photograph of troops coming off the landing craft. So the example of play looks pretty in-depth, pretty long. That's fantastic. And here we have what look like a lengthy set of designer's notes, which is also fantastic. Be very curious to see what Ted's thoughts on the design are. Here are reproductions of the counter sheets. Here's where our index starts. So the playbook looks pretty nice. We have here 3 player aids. So it looks like we have one for each player. And these have the CRTs, Cherbourg combat table, weather effects summary, and a TEC on the back. There's a moderate amount of different terrain in this. And then the third card is the action chit availability table. It's got a sequence of play on it, a rebuilds cost table, general rule reminders, and victory point stuff. So that's pretty nice. If you're getting the impression that I consider this a relatively light game, you'd be correct. All right, so, and here we go with the counters. And we pretty much have a sheet of Allied counters and a sheet of British counters. We can see, however, that there's some free French units, some free French brigades down here that are in the American color, but they have, because that was an armored formation. They're the armor symbol is a different color. The Canadians are their own color inside the British, as are the Poles. All of those did participate in this campaign historically. And we do have a couple of these bombers. Looks like there's a carpet bombing chit. So we've got some various control markers up here, some miscellaneous markers, and then these might be the actual chits that you are drawing. And then over here, we have the Germans, and unlike the Allies, it's pretty much all Germans except for conscripted Ost battalions that mostly fought on the actual beaches that were part of the beach defenses. You get your SS in a darker gray or blue-gray or whatever color that is in this very poor light. And you've got some static positions, which looks like they're of randomly determined strength, anywhere between 1 and 2. And there's even a couple of 3s in there. Interesting. So we have some more of these chits. And the counters themselves are what I take to be 9/16 inch counters. And they're on this pretty thick brown core stock that GMT's been using lately for a lot of their stuff. So let's take a look at the map. Game is, I could certainly consider this a handsome game. There's at least one interesting feature of the map that I'll point out once I get it laid down. But I don't have space on this table to have other stuff laid out. All right, so we have here. All right, so here's Normandy, and here's, of course, Utah Beach is going to be in here. Omaha Beach is going to be in here. Gold, Juno, and Sword. Airborne landings will be in this area, and over here, east of the Orne. You'll notice that the Cotentin Peninsula is cut off at the top of the map. There is a Cherbourg box, so that is kind of just handled as an off-map thing, which, given the way that went down historically, that's probably not a terrible idea. But you'll also notice, and I'm not sure how much of this you're going to be able to see in frame here, that the map goes down as far as Mortain. So this is, of course, where the famous Mortain pocket occurred around here, in which a whole lot of German units were cut off. So, and then we have what looks like an operational boundary between U.S. and British sectors. And we do have a turn record track. We have some tracks on the side here. There's a terrain key, weather track, victory point track, and turn record track. So it looks like what we have here are 4 turns per month. So they're basically weekly turns. That's interesting, and to contrast it with other Normandy games at relatively similar scale. So the turn scale for Normandy 44, for example, is 1 day per turn. And if you go up to something larger, like a Battle for Normandy, or even a not Vakdam Rhine, but Atlantic Wall or something like that, then your turn scale is 3 turns per day. But those are much larger games, right? Those are battalion level games, where this looks like a solidly regimental level game. Also without some oddities in certain previous games on the subject, like the old SPI Cobra, for example, in which some units are represented by divisions and some units are represented by regiments, and I'm not clear what the distinction is supposed to be. So other than maybe the unit's historical performance, that's possible, but it seemed arbitrary when I looked at that game. So what we have had here is a pretty quick look at Ted Racer's latest. Actually, it's not latest in the system, but it is from GMT. The Dark Summer, about the Normandy campaign. So this covers, in case I'm not clear about this, covers the whole campaign out through August. Something like Atlantic Wall, SPI Atlantic Wall covers to the very beginning of July. I want to say that Normandy 44 covers to the beginning of July. I might be misremembering that since it's been a little while. The Dark Summer does cover the entire campaign, including the Cobra Breakout and the up to Mortain Pocket and more than you're going to get in a similarly sized game on the Battle for Normandy of those that I have looked at, which has been a fair number, but I haven't seen them all yet either. So hopefully you've enjoyed this quick look at the Dark Summer from GMT Games designer Ted Racer. If you have, please do thumbs up the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to help support Ardwulf's Lair, please do check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.